Hey, I'm David. Every place Jesus went in his ministry, he could have skipped. He didn't have to preach in a fishing village. He didn't have to cross a lake to reach a graveyard full of tombs on foreign soil. He didn't have to walk through a region that respectable people avoided, but he did. Every single time, and when I started mapping out where Jesus went against what the Hebrew scriptures already said about those places, I found something most casual readers of the Gospels miss entirely. Jesus wasn't just teaching truth. He was walking straight into old prophecies and old wounds on purpose to make a point that words alone couldn't make. So today I want to walk you through geography as prophecy, how the places in the Gospels are doing theological work, not just serving as a backdrop. Part 1. Galilee of the Gentiles. Let's start with the base of Jesus' entire ministry. Galilee. Here's what I want you to picture. If you were a serious religious teacher in the first century, Galilee was not where you set up shop. Jerusalem was the center of religious life, the temple, the priesthood, the scholars. Galilee, by contrast, had a reputation. It was rural, it was mixed, it was looked down on. There's a moment in John's Gospel where Nathanael hears Jesus is from Nazareth in Galilee and basically says, "Can anything good come out of that place?" That wasn't just one guy being rude. It reflected how Judea generally viewed the north. And here's why. Centuries earlier, in 732 BC, the Assyrian Empire conquered the northern regions of Israel, including Galilee, and deported large portions of the population, the beginning of what's remembered as the exile of the northern tribes. Foreign peoples were resettled in the region. Over the following centuries, Galilee became religiously and ethnically mixed in a way Judea, further south, did not. By Jesus' time, it had a long-standing nickname baked right into the Hebrew Bible, Galilee of the nations, or, as it's often translated, Galilee of the Gentiles. That phrase comes directly from the prophet Isaiah, writing centuries before Jesus was born, in a passage about darkness and devastation falling on exactly this region, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. Isaiah 9, 1-2. Zebulun and Naphtali were two of the 12 tribes whose territory covered Galilee. Isaiah names the exact region that would suffer conquest and humiliation, and promises that this same region, of all places, would one day see a great light. Now watch how Matthew's gospel frames Jesus' decision to relocate his base of ministry, and leaving Nazareth, he went and dwelt in Capernaum, which is by the sea, in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, "The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people which sat in darkness saw great light." Matthew 4:13-16. Matthew doesn't just mention that Jesus moved to Capernaum. He deliberately quotes Isaiah's exact geographic markers, Zebulun, Naphtali, Galilee of the nations, to make sure no reader misses the connection. This isn't incidental. Jesus picks, as his home base, the precise region that had carried the weight of conquest, deportation, and religious disdain for 700 years. And Matthew is telling us, that's not a coincidence. That's the light showing up exactly where the darkness had been named centuries earlier. I want you to sit with what this meant practically. Jesus' core teaching, his best-known miracles, the calling of his closest disciples, nearly all of it happens in a region the religious establishment considered second-rate, ethnically compromised, spiritually behind. If you wanted to make a statement that God's attention isn't limited to the correct people in the correct city, you could hardly choose a more pointed location than Galilee. Part 2. The other side of the lake. If Galilee was a geographic statement, what happens next takes it even further. In Mark chapter 5, and its parallels in Matthew and Luke, Jesus gets in a boat and deliberately crosses the Sea of Galilee to the region of the Gerasenes, sometimes called the Gadarenes, depending on which exact town the text has in view. This is the region across the lake from Jewish Galilee. Gentile territory, part of a loose federation of Greek-influenced cities known as the Decapolis. The text gives us a small but telling detail almost immediately. There's a large herd of pigs feeding nearby. I want to flag why that matters. Pigs are significant here precisely because they're not something you'd find being raised in Jewish territory. Their presence is the text's shorthand for, you are no longer in familiar territory. This is foreign ground. And who does Jesus meet there? A man living among the tombs, so overwhelmed by what the Gospels describe as demonic affliction that no chains could hold him, cutting himself among the graves, cast out even by his own community. If Galilee represented a people looked down on by the religious center, this man represents someone cast out even from that margin, living literally among the dead, outside every social boundary that existed. Think about that crossing for a second. Jesus crosses an entire body of water, a genuinely dangerous crossing, storm included. In the verses right before this story, for one encounter with one man that nobody else considered worth the trip, the text tells us Jesus restores him, calm, clothed in his right mind. And then something happens that I think is easy to miss. Jesus doesn't ask the man to follow him back across the lake as a disciple. Instead, and when he was come into the ship, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, Go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee. Mark 5:18-19. He becomes the first person in Mark's gospel explicitly commissioned to go and tell people what God has done for him, and he does it in Gentile territory among the Decapolis, well before the Great Commission is ever spoken to the 12 apostles. The geography here isn't decoration. Jesus goes to the one place nobody expected him to go, restores the one person nobody expected to be restored, and plants, quietly, without fanfare, the very first seed of the gospel reaching beyond Israel. Port 3. The pattern. Once you start seeing this happen twice, you start noticing it everywhere in the Gospels. Jesus deliberately travels through Samaria, territory most observant Jews of his day went out of their way to avoid, and has a long, theologically rich conversation with a Samaritan woman at a well tied to the patriarch Jacob, a location loaded with its own ancestral history. He's tempted in the wilderness for 40 days, deliberately echoing Israel's 40 years wandering the wilderness after the Exodus. Except where Israel failed the test repeatedly, the Gospels present Jesus succeeding. He's born, according to Micah's prophecy, in the small, unremarkable town of Bethlehem. Too little to be among the thousands of Judah, rather than in a city that would have made more political sense for a claimed king. Every one of these locations is doing quiet theological work. The gospel writers are constantly saying, through geography, what they don't always say outright in speech. The old story isn't being discarded, it's being completed in the exact places where it was left open. Why? This matters. Here's what I take away from all this. It would be easy to read the Gospels as a list of teachings and miracles that could have technically happened anywhere. But the Gospel writers clearly didn't think so. They kept naming specific regions, specific bodies of water, specific towns, because for their original readers, steeped in the Hebrew Scriptures, those place names carried centuries of memory. Conquest, exile, disgrace, hope deferred by walking into Galilee of the nations and across the lake into Gentile tombs. Jesus wasn't simply choosing convenient locations for teaching. He was making an argument with his feet that no region, no history of judgment, no boundary line was outside the reach of what he came to do. So next time you're reading a gospel story and it names a place, Galilee, Samaria, the Decapolis, a well, a mountain, pause for a second and ask yourself, what did this place already mean before Jesus arrived? Because often, that's exactly where the point of the story is hiding. If this opens something up for you, subscribe for more studies like this one, and share it with someone who'd find it interesting too. I'm David. I'll see you in the next one.